When it comes to your kids, talking with their doctor about pain relief prescriptions is an important factor in fighting against the growing opioid crisis. But how do you do that?
It's so hard to talk to kids sometimes, but today we have Kent McLennan and Michele Conklin. Michelle's a parent. They're here to talk about the Speak Now Colorado campaign. You're also with what?
Rise Above Colorado.
Rise Above Colorado. You know, we were so excited just bringing you on to set today because a lot of this is really about communication when it comes to opioids and starting with the kids, I think. So why is this so important, the conversation that's going on?
Well, I think when we talk a lot about the opioid epidemic, one of the things that's important to realize is that these drugs are addictive, whether they're prescribed for you or not. And especially that's even more true when we're talking about adolescents because of the developing teen brain. And so all the brain science, it shows that 90% of addictions happen in those teen years, and it's because that brain's developing, and so they're all the more susceptible. So we want to make sure that parents are having conversations with their teens and with their teens' doctors about if there's a need for something like that, what are the alternatives and what are the options because of the risk of addiction.
Yeah, that's what we keep hearing when, you know, the opioid addictions often start with a prescribed medication, you know, and then it goes on from there. So what types of questions would you suggest, you know, get the conversation going?
Well, and I think Michele can talk to her own experience about it too, but I think one of the really important things is what are the alternatives? Do I need this medication? How much of it do I need? How is it going to affect me or my child? And then see what other alternatives might be out there, because there are non-narcotic options for treating pain, and I think we're seeing more and more doctors and physicians being able to be educated in that way. But I think it's an important part for parents to be educated going into that conversation with a doctor.
Okay, so the Speak Now Colorado campaign stresses talking to your kids, not only about opioids, but all drugs. How can we do this? Do you have like one tip where I can start this conversation?
Well, I guess our best tip would be go to speaknowcolorado.org.
Oh, okay.
It's really, the website's been redone, and it's really organized around different age groups, because obviously you talk to a 9 to 13-year-old differently than you talk to a 16-year-old, right? And so those conversations look a little different because the options and the exposure is a little different too, right? So it's age appropriate. I think that's really important. It's never too early to start that conversations, especially even if you think about prescription drugs, about what is the proper use of prescription drugs. You can start that conversation at a much younger age and modeling that behavior of how our kids see us and the way that we react in those situations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, Michele, we understand that you have an experience with your son being prescribed some opioids. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my son's now in college, but when he was in high school, he was a pitcher for his varsity baseball team, and he tore his labrum. And so we had scheduled surgery with an orthopedic surgeon, and on the pre-surgical visit, the last one where you go in and you're talking about what to do the night before and when to get to the hospital, I asked him, what kind of painkiller are you going to use? And he looked at me very quizzically. And now this was a few years ago, about 2 years ago, when there really wasn't this discussion going on. I said, well, are you going to be using opioids? And he said, well, yes, that's standard. And I said, well, what alternatives do we have? And he didn't know. I mean, the conversation kind of stopped, and he said, well, you need to go talk to your primary care. Well, primary care physician isn't involved in surgery. He's not going to be in the hospital. He's not going to follow up. And so we actually canceled the surgery at that point.
Really?
Yeah, and it was, you know, that surgery, if athletes know, it's kind of a controversial anyway, whether you get it or don't get it. So it wasn't like it was an urgent, we had to get him in there and have surgery. But I just thought, if he won't even talk to me about that, or what are my concerns, or ask me questions, I wasn't so sure about him as a surgeon.
Yeah. So ultimately, did your son get the shoulder taken care of without having to use any opioids?
He did, and I was telling Kent, it was very interesting, just like a year after that, he had his wisdom teeth pulled, and we talked with the oral surgeon, had the same question, completely different conversation. The oral surgeon asked what we were concerned about, we talked about how much should he get, and we really watched it. We kept it locked away. We gave it to him and wrote down the time. We intermixed over-the-counter painkillers with it and got him off very quick.
You're a smart mama.
Yeah, very enlightening.
Because I don't know that I would have been that thorough, you know, worried about that. So thank you so much for coming on and starting the conversation. I think parents need to do this in their home. So for more information on the Speak Now Colorado campaign, head to speaknowcolorado.org. And if you'd like information on Rise Above, just head to riseaboveco.org.
Well, still much more to come on Colorado's